The facility's fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song of institutional efficiency, casting everything in the particular shade of sterile white that made even hope look antiseptic. David Chen pushed his maintenance cart down Corridor 7 with the resigned rhythm of someone who had learned that government employment meant accepting that most of his workday would involve fixing things that shouldn't have been broken in the first place. What he hadn't expected was that his latest assignment would involve aliens who apparently had very different ideas about appropriate workplace interactions. The new maintenance technician will be handling the xenobiology wing, Dr. Elena Vasquez had explained that morning, her voice carrying the particular tension of someone who was about to make someone else's day significantly more complicated. We've had some personnel difficulties in that section. David had nodded, figuring that personnel difficulties probably meant someone had quit after discovering that cleaning alien quarters involved hazmat protocols and possibly existential crisis counseling. What he found instead was two beings that made him question everything he thought he knew about first contact procedures and interdimensional diplomacy. Queen Altera occupied the larger containment suite, with the regal bearing of someone who had never doubted that the universe owed her deference. Her elongated ears swept back like elegant sculptures, and her skin carried a luminescent quality that suggested either advanced biology or really expensive skincare. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent centuries expecting others to step out of her way, and when she looked at David through the reinforced viewing panel, her smile carried the particular confidence of someone who was accustomed to getting exactly what she wanted. "A new servant," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to shimmer. "How refreshing! Your predecessors lacked imagination." David paused in his floor mopping, wondering if alien royalty typically engaged in casual conversation with janitorial staff. "I'm just here to maintain the facilities, Your Majesty. Standard cleaning and repair protocols." "Your Majesty," she repeated with evident satisfaction. "At least this one has been properly briefed on protocol." "Come closer, Servant David. I wish to examine you more thoroughly." There was something in her tone that suggested this wasn't really a request, and David found his feet carrying him toward the viewing panel despite his better judgment. Up close, Queen Altera was even more imposing, her presence filling the room with an energy that made his maintenance equipment hum with sympathetic resonance. "You have potential," she announced after studying him with eyes that seemed to shift color like liquid opal. "Strong genetic markers, adequate physical conditioning, and a mind that shows promise for enhancement. You will do nicely." "Do for what?" "For partnership, naturally. I am prepared to offer you a position as my consort when I establish my new domain on this world." Her smile was dazzling and slightly predatory. "You would rule at my side, elevated beyond your current humble circumstances to heights that your primitive species could never achieve independently." David blinked several times, wondering if alien mind control felt like being offered an interdimensional job promotion by someone who looked like she could bench press a small spacecraft. "I think there might be some misunderstanding about my role here." "There is no misunderstanding. I have observed your species' social hierarchies and determined that formal partnership with one of your males will facilitate the establishment of my new empire. You demonstrate suitable characteristics for selective breeding and administrative cooperation." She gestured elegantly, and the lights in her containment suite began dancing in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Consider the advantages: immortality, power beyond your current comprehension, and the opportunity to help guide two species into a new era of cooperative expansion." Before David could formulate a response that wouldn't either insult alien royalty or commit him to interspecies marriage, a soft sound from the adjacent cell caught his attention. Through the smaller viewing panel, he glimpsed the facility's other alien occupant, and the contrast was startling. Where Queen Altera radiated power and confidence, The second alien seemed to be trying to disappear entirely. She huddled in the corner of her sparse cell, her pointed ears drooping with exhaustion, her luminescent skin dim with what looked like malnutrition and despair. Her clothes were simple, worn, and seemed designed for utility rather than impression. When she noticed David looking, she immediately averted her gaze and tried to make herself even smaller. "Don't waste your attention on that one," Queen Altera said dismissively. "Kira is merely a servant, useful only for menial labor. She has no value beyond basic maintenance functions." "She looks hungry," David observed, noting the alien woman's thin frame and the way she seemed to be rationing even her movements to conserve energy. "Servants eat when their work is satisfactory. It is the natural order." The Queen's tone suggested that this was as fundamental as gravity and equally non-negotiable. "You should focus your concern on more worthy subjects, such as the magnificent opportunities I am offering you." David found himself looking back at Kira, who was carefully avoiding meeting his eyes while apparently trying to blend into the wall. There was something about her posture that reminded him of abandoned animals he had encountered, that particular wariness that came from expecting nothing good from any interaction. "What did she do wrong?" he asked. "Wrong?" Queen Altera seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. "She is a servant. Her existence is defined by her utility to her superiors. She requires no justification beyond her function. But she's a person, a sentient being." "She is a resource," the Queen corrected with the patience of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a child. "A useful one, but entirely replaceable. Your species' tendency to anthropomorphize inferior beings is charming but impractical." David felt a familiar anger building in his chest, the same feeling he got when he encountered bullying or cruelty disguised as natural order. "She's not inferior. She's just in a bad situation." Queen Altera's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement if it hadn't carried undertones of condescension. "Your compassion is admirable, David, though misdirected. When you accept my offer, you will learn to prioritize more effectively. The concerns of servants will seem trivial compared to the responsibilities of leadership. And if I don't accept your offer, that would be inadvisable." The Queen's smile remained perfectly pleasant while her eyes suggested that refusing alien royalty might have consequences beyond simple social awkwardness. "I am offering you everything your species has dreamed of: advancement, power, partnership with a being of superior capabilities. Rejection of such an opportunity would demonstrate poor judgment that might require correction." David nodded slowly, recognizing a threat when he heard one, even when it was delivered with diplomatic politeness. "I'll need to think about it. Of course, though I should mention that my patience, while considerable, is not infinite. I have an empire to rebuild and limited time to devote to courtship rituals." Queen Altera settled back into her luxurious chair, which appeared to have been assembled from the containment cell's basic furniture, but somehow looked like a throne. "I trust you will make the correct decision quickly." David's lunch break had become the most diplomatically complex 30 minutes of his day, involving careful navigation between an alien queen's escalating courtship displays and his growing concern for what appeared to be the universe's most neglected refugee. Queen Altera had transformed her containment suite into something resembling a royal court, complete with holographic displays that showed the architectural wonders of her lost civilization and energy sculptures that danced through the air like captured aurora. "Behold the crystal spires of Valderin," she announced as David approached with his standard-issue sandwich and thermos of coffee. "My personal palace commanded a view of 7 different star systems. The recreational facilities alone covered more territory than your largest cities." The holographic display was genuinely impressive, showing towers that seemed to be built from crystallized light reaching toward alien skies. David made appropriate appreciative noises while unwrapping his sandwich, noting that Queen Altera's presentations were becoming more elaborate each day, as if she were auditioning for the role of interdimensional interior decorator. "Magnificent," he said, which seemed to be the expected response. "This is merely one of dozens of palaces I maintained across my domain. When we establish my new empire here, I will construct similar wonders using your planet's resources enhanced with superior alien engineering." The Queen gestured, and the holographic palace rotated slowly, revealing architectural details that defied several laws of physics. "You would have your own wing, of course, a consort's quarters appropriate to your elevated status." "That's very generous," David replied, taking a bite of his sandwich while trying to figure out how to politely decline an offer of alien real estate development. "Though I have to ask, what happened to your original empire?" Queen Altera's expression flickered momentarily, the serene confidence cracking just enough to reveal something that might have been embarrassment or anger. "Philosophical differences with neighboring civilizations. They lacked vision for proper expansion and cooperation." David had learned that when politicians used phrases like philosophical differences, it usually meant someone had started a war. "And Kira, was she part of your empire?" "A minor functionary. Kitchen staff, I believe, or perhaps data processing. The servant classes blur together after a while." The Queen's dismissive tone suggested that Kira's background was about as interesting to her as the facility's plumbing specifications. "Why do you persist in asking about her? She is irrelevant to our discussions." David glanced toward the adjacent cell, where Kira was slowly eating what appeared to be a protein bar, with the careful precision of someone who wanted to make minimal food last as long as possible. She had been given the same meal allocation as Queen Altera, but while the Queen's food sat largely untouched, apparently alien royalty had standards. Kira treated every bite like a precious resource. "She looks like she could use more food," David observed. "She receives adequate nutrition for her function. Overfeeding servants leads to laziness and presumption." Queen Altera created another light display, this one showing what appeared to be alien agricultural systems of stunning beauty and efficiency. "When you join me, you will understand the importance of maintaining proper hierarchy. Excessive compassion toward inferiors disrupts social stability." David finished his sandwich and made a decision that he suspected would complicate his life considerably. He walked to Kira's cell, where she immediately retreated further into her corner, apparently expecting some form of punishment or harassment. "Hey," he said gently, pressing his face close to the reinforced viewing panel. "I'm David. I brought you something." Kira looked up with the wary expression of someone who had learned that unexpected kindness usually preceded unexpected cruelty. Her eyes were the same shifting opal as Queen Altera's, but where the Queen's gaze commanded attention, Kira's seemed to apologize for existing. David slid his spare granola bar through the food slot, along with half of his coffee in a disposable cup. "You look hungry, and I figured you might like something different from the standard protein bars." Kira stared at the offerings as if they might be some form of elaborate trap. When David didn't demand anything in return, or the morning David arrived to find Queen Altera's containment suite transformed into what appeared to be the throne room of an interdimensional empress, he realized that alien patients operated on different timelines than human bureaucracy. The Queen had somehow manipulated the facility's systems to create a dazzling display of power that turned her simple cell into a crystalline palace complete with floating platforms, cascading energy fountains, and what looked suspiciously like a crown made of pure light hovering above her head. "Impressive, isn't it?" Dr. Vasquez said, appearing beside David with the harried expression of someone whose research subjects had decided to redecorate without permission. "She did it overnight. Our engineers can't figure out how she interfaced with systems that weren't supposed to be accessible from inside the containment area." "Is it safe?" David asked, watching energy patterns dance across surfaces that had been plain metal walls the day before. Defined safe. She's not hurting anyone, but she's essentially holding the entire facility hostage until she gets what she wants. And what she wants, apparently, is you. As if summoned by their conversation, Queen Altera appeared at the center of her transformed domain, radiating power and regal authority. Her voice carried across the facility's intercom system, reaching every corner of the building with crystalline clarity. "Citizens of this research installation," she announced, "I have grown weary of diplomatic delays and bureaucratic inefficiency. It is time for decisive action." Dr. Vasquez grabbed her radio. "Security, we have a situation in the xenobiology wing." "Negative, Doctor. Queen Altera has control of our security systems. She's locked us out of everything except basic life support." The voice crackled with the particular strain of technical personnel, discovering that their expertise was suddenly inadequate. "She's also broadcasting on all frequencies, including some that shouldn't theoretically exist." Queen Altera's amplified voice continued her proclamation. "I hereby extend a formal offer of alliance to the government of this nation. I will share the advanced technologies of my people and serve as a liaison for peaceful cooperation between our species. In return, I require recognition of my sovereign status and the formal appointment of David Chen as my chosen consort and co-ruler." David felt the weight of an entire facility's attention focusing on him like a particularly uncomfortable spotlight. "She can't be serious." "She's very serious," Dr. Vasquez replied grimly. "And according to the readings we're getting, she has enough power to level this entire complex if she decides we're not being cooperative enough." In the smaller cell adjacent to the Queen's transformed throne room, Kira had been watching the proceedings with the expression of someone who had seen this particular performance before. When David approached her viewing panel, she looked up with something that might have been sympathy mixed with resignation. "She is not accustomed to hearing the word no," Kira said quietly. "In our society, refusing a queen's offer of partnership was considered a form of treason." What happened to people who committed treason? They ceased to exist, along with their families, their communities, and occasionally their entire planetary systems if the Queen felt that stronger examples were necessary. Kira's matter-of-fact tone suggested that genocidal temper tantrums were just another aspect of royal privilege she had learned to navigate. "Queen Altera does not handle rejection with grace." "What about you? Did you ever refuse her orders?" Kira's expression grew complicated, cycling through emotions that suggested a much more complex history than her servant status implied. "I questioned the wisdom of certain policies. I suggested that perhaps conquering neighboring systems was strategically inadvisable given our limited resources and the growing alliance against us." "That sounds reasonable." Queen Altera classified it as sedition. "I was demoted from Chief Systems Engineer to General Maintenance Staff. Others who supported my recommendations were discouraged from future policy discussions." David was beginning to understand why Queen Altera's empire had collapsed and why Kira had been characterized as unimportant kitchen staff. "So you were actually a Chief Systems Engineer." "For 12 years. I designed the quantum communication networks, the planetary defense grids, the environmental management systems." Kira's voice carried a note of quiet pride that suggested professional competence was something she held onto despite her current circumstances. "I also predicted the exact sequence of events that led to our civilization's downfall, though my warnings were dismissed as pessimistic speculation by inferior minds." The facility's intercom crackled back to life as Queen Altera grew impatient with the lack of immediate response to her demands. "I have demonstrated my capabilities and extended generous terms for cooperation. I now require formal acceptance of my proposal within one of your Earth hours, or I will be forced to seek alternative arrangements." "Alternative arrangements," Dr. Vasquez muttered into her radio. What does that mean? The answer came in the form of energy readings that made the facility's sensors scream warnings about imminent containment failure. Queen Altera was apparently preparing to leave her cell through the simple expedient of converting it into component atoms. She's going to break out, David realized, and then probably conquer the nearest major city to use as leverage in her negotiations with world governments, Kira added helpfully. She has done this before. Standard operating procedure, when diplomacy fails to achieve desired results quickly enough. Dr. Vasquez was coordinating evacuation procedures, while simultaneously trying to contact every government agency that might have protocols for alien queens, holding entire facilities hostage. David found himself staring at Kira, who seemed remarkably calm for someone whose former employer was about to demonstrate the kind of power that made nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. "How do we stop her?" he asked. "We don't," Kira replied simply. "Queen Altera's power sources are beyond anything your current technology can interfere with. She will do exactly what she has announced, and your governments will eventually capitulate to her demands rather than face the destruction of your major population centers. So I should just agree to be her consort and help her conquer the planet. That would be the logical choice for someone prioritizing survival and personal advancement." Kira's expression grew thoughtful, though it would also mean accepting responsibility for everything she does afterward. Queens do not typically limit their ambitions to single planets. David felt the weight of an impossible choice settling on his shoulders. Accept Queen Altera's offer and become complicit in the conquest of his own species, or refuse, and watch her demonstrate why alien royalty didn't handle rejection well. "There is a third option," Kira said quietly, as if reading his thoughts, "which is, tell your Dr. Vasquez that I would like to speak with her privately. There are things about Queen Altera's technology that she should understand before making any irreversible decisions. Such as the fact that every system she builds contains fundamental weaknesses that I helped design, and the fact that someone who spent 15 years maintaining her technology might know how to unmaintain it if necessary." Kira's smile was small but carried the particular satisfaction of an expert who had been underestimated for far too long. "Your species' tendency to value compassion over hierarchy may have created an unexpected advantage in this situation." The moment of truth arrived with the subtle elegance of a diplomatic crisis, wrapped in interdimensional fireworks. Queen Altera had given the facility exactly 1 hour to accept her terms, and with 58 minutes elapsed, David found himself standing in the center of the xenobiology wing making a choice that would either save 2 civilizations or get him killed by the most powerful being he had ever encountered. "I've made my decision," he announced, his voice carrying through Queen Altera's commandeered intercom system to every corner of the facility. The alien queen materialized in the center of her crystalline throne room, radiant with victory, and already beginning to reshape the space around her into something suitable for a coronation ceremony. "Excellent. I knew you would demonstrate wisdom worthy of your elevation to royal consort. I choose Kira." The silence that followed was profound enough to suggest that the universe itself had paused to consider the implications of this statement. Queen Altera's luminous presence flickered like a candle in a hurricane, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and rapidly escalating fury. "You choose what?" she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the facility's walls vibrate sympathetically. "I choose Kira," David repeated, moving to stand directly in front of the refugee's cell. "I request asylum for her, protection under human law, and recognition of her right to remain on Earth as a free individual." Queen Altera's laugh was like crystalline wind chimes being shattered by a hurricane. "You reject partnership with a queen to protect a worthless servant. Have you suffered some form of cranial damage that has impaired your cognitive functions?" "My cognitive functions are fine. I just prefer to ally myself with people who value intelligence over intimidation and cooperation over conquest. David placed his hand against Kira's viewing panel, noting that she was staring at him with the expression of someone who had just witnessed something impossible. Plus, I've learned some interesting things about your former chief systems engineer. Former what? Queen Altera's voice carried a note of genuine confusion. Chief systems engineer. The position Kira held before you demoted her for having opinions about your expansion policies. David smiled with the particular satisfaction of someone who had discovered that the person everyone underestimated was actually the most qualified individual in the room. The same Kira who designed every major system in your empire and might know a few things about their operational parameters. Queen Altera's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization, then immediately to the kind of rage that suggested someone had just discovered they had been outmaneuvered by their own arrogance. Impossible, she is a servant, a maintenance functionary. She has no knowledge of advanced systems architecture. Actually, Dr. Vasquez said, appearing at David's shoulder with a tablet displaying readings that made her look like someone who had just solved a very complicated puzzle. Our scans indicate that Kira's neural patterns show the kind of complex technical knowledge that comes from years of advanced engineering experience. She's been cooperating with our technical team for the past 30 minutes. The Queen turned toward Kira's cell, her luminous presence now carrying distinctly threatening undertones. You dare to betray your rightful sovereign. You would side with these primitive beings against your own species. I side with beings who value competence over status and cooperation over domination, Kira replied, her voice steady despite the fact that she was essentially committing treason against someone who could obliterate solar systems when sufficiently annoyed. Your Majesty's approach to interspecies relations demonstrates the same strategic flaws that led to our civilization's collapse. Queen Altera's fury manifested as a wave of energy that turned the air itself into something resembling liquid lightning. The facility's emergency systems began screaming warnings as power levels spiked beyond anything the containment systems were designed to handle. You will regret this defiance, she snarled, raising her hands to channel what appeared to be enough energy to turn the entire complex into a crater. Actually, Kira said calmly, you might want to check your power matrix stability before committing to destructive displays. Queen Altera paused in her preparation for what had probably been intended as a finale worthy of alien conquest documentation. Her expression shifted from murderous rage to confusion as she apparently discovered